Things Podcast. Hey, Phantomaniacs, welcome to the newest episode of the Needless Things Podcast, where we talk about toys, movies, music, and all manner of pop culture dorkery. And of course, there is no bigger phenomenon in the world of movies and pop culture dorkery right now than Avengers Endgame. And we're going to be talking about it on the show today with our pals, head of research, Ryan Schweck, and our resident crank, Mr. Arian. We're going to have a lot of fun later on, but before we get to that, I've got some stuff I want to put over. As a host, I want to do a little bit better with partnering up with people, with putting the word out on things that I think are cool, and normally I would stick to maybe one or two things a week if I can get back into my stride of actually communicating with people. But this week, I'm going to drop a bunch of information on you. Get your pens out or your notepad in your phone or however you prefer to make notes of important things, because I have some important things for you to make note of. The first thing I want to mention is that it's May, which means it is time once again for Atlanta's premier gaming, comic, cosplay, anime convention, MomoCon. Just go in there, Google MomoCon. You'll get all the information you need. I will have more information for you in the coming weeks, and I will once again be a member of the press at MomoCon this year. Last year, if you remember, I had an absolute blast. We talked to Renee Cooper, who is the head of media relations for MomoCon, and might be talking to her again this year. And we also had a great conversation with our pal Michael Gordon about MomoCon and just what it's about. So the energy at that convention is like nothing else. You guys know anime, I love cosplayers. I love the atmosphere when cosplay is around, but for the most part, it's just not my thing. I don't have the skills, I don't have the patience, and I don't have, I'm a little warm to be wearing lots of costumes all the time. I tend to run a little hot. But anyway, despite that, MomoCon is one of the most fun, wonderful atmospheres I have ever been in, and I look forward to going back this year. So get on the Google, check out MomoCon, see who all is going to be there. There's a great guest list, and again, on needlessthingspodcast.com and on the podcast itself, in the coming weeks, I'll have more information for you about that. Another thing that I want to mention is the Smyrna Comic Book Toy and Art Convention, which is being put on by Chris Hamer, who is a local artist, tattoo artist, head of Urban Pop Studios, just an all-around great guy who I've known for years now, and is not only a real sweetheart, but has a unique creative vision that we really enjoy here in the Phantom Zone. But he is putting on Smyrna's first ever toy and comic convention. You can go to legioncomic-convention.com. You've got plenty of time to check it out. It's August 3rd. It's in Smyrna at the American Legion Post. And just go to the website, check it out. You can also find Smyrna Toy and Comic Convention on Facebook. Follow the page there, obviously. Facebook, as much as I may hate it, it is kind of the hub for information and events and that sort of thing. Like, whatever other horrible aspects there are to Facebook, it does make it easy to keep track of all the stuff that you want to do. And if you're in the Atlanta area, the Smyrna Toy and Comic Convention is something that you want to do. They've got a guest list up now. It looks like it's going to be a really fun initial event, and it's always interesting to go to these first-time events because they're going to have their own flavor. They're very much going to be whoever's running them. That first one is such a good indication of like who this person is, what they enjoy. It's always very interesting to me to see what's going down at these first-time shows. Okay, next item of business. If you have not listened to episode 4 of the Needless Things minicast, which went up earlier this week, please go to needlessthingspodcast.com or iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts from? At this point, I think I can just enter in an episode of the Needless Things podcast, like just Google it, and it like literally just brings the episode up and we'll play it. Like, I don't even think you need an app now. They're just all out there. But check out Episode 4 of the Needless Things minicast. Talk to somebody who I've actually known for years now, but have never had on the show, Raymond Carr, who is a tremendously talented set designer, puppeteer, creator, writer, director. He's one of those guys who does it all, and it's kind of annoying when you think of how good he is at all of the things that he does. He is working on a movie called Joyriders, and I sat down and I talked with him about not just the process of creating Joyriders and running a crowdsourced funding campaign on a site called Seed and Spark, which if you Google Seed and Spark Joyriders, you'll find the appropriate site. It's a fascinating new, well, I guess it's not all that new, but it's just for filmmakers. And it's dedicated around getting them, not just money, getting them the tools and the support they need to make their visions happen. And I think it's awesome, and I was really excited to hear about that. And we talk just not about this genesis of Joyriders, but also about sort of the cultural history of pop culture, science fiction, and class and race, and all the things that are encompassed with a black filmmaker trying to make something that represents his personal life and vision. It was a great conversation, and we'll have Raymond Carr back on for a full interview at some point in the future. But for right now, please do check out episode 4 of the minicast with our pal Raymond Carr, and go check out Seed and Spark Joyriders. And you can also, again, you can get on Facebook, follow Joyriders Movie, and get all the information there as well. And finally, the last thing I want to mention, I have a special musical treat for you today. Our friend Noah Holt, who was on an older episode of the Needless Things podcast, again, use the Google, his band called the KBK, and they have just released a CD that is a compilation of the first 10 years of the KBK's musical output. It's fantastic. I'm going to play a selection from it in just a minute here, but if you Google the KBK, you'll find their CD Baby, you'll find their Reverb Nation, you'll find, they're all over the place. Facebook, again. But you can currently order a CD or a digital download of that album that contains the first 10 years of KBK music. You can also get a really cool compilation of different Alabama garage rock and surf rock bands. You can get that on vinyl, which was exciting to me because I used to really, really enjoy grabbing 7 inches and stuff back in the day of all the punk bands that I would see, because I knew a lot of people that played in different bands. I had tons of stuff, Tone Deaf Pig Dog, Stuck at Zero, the Grumpies, I can't even remember, but every show, like, you'd go to see your friend's band play, but then other bands from, like, out of town would play, and you'd just buy everybody's records, and everybody was making these cool 7 inches, and they were doing split singles where one band would be on one side, one band would be on the other side, or you'd get a single that had like all 6 songs that the band had recorded and they all fit on a 7-inch because they're only a minute and a half each or whatever. But you met these people and then got to take their music home and have it to play on your record player. And I used to have this great collection of 7 inches from all over the Southeast and beyond of bands that I had seen. And it was really special to me, and I really loved knowing that in some capacity I knew these people or had met them or had some kind of, punk rock meet and greet with them or whatever the case may be. These kids coming in from town, sleeping in a van. Hey, we met you at South Carolina. Do you want to come play in Georgia? Hey, we met you in Alabama. Do you want to come play in North Carolina? Hey, you're from Florida. Come up to Atlanta. Check it out. Like, that was the relationship back then. It was very organic. And because these bands traveled, they brought in other bands from other places where they visited. And being able to have these awesome artifacts of my personal musical history I loved it. But then 10 years ago, when the house flooded, I lost it all, every single bit of it, and it broke my heart. I didn't mind losing Prince or Weird Al or Korn, and I had a Korn album. Granted, it was signed, and that'll never be replaced. But that stuff, it was a bummer. But the stuff that really killed me was losing all those 7 inches, because obviously those are absolutely irreplaceable. I'll never have them back. Fortunately, I had most of them that I had recorded onto MP3, but still, to no longer have those items that represented those memories and those good times was a bummer. But now I've got, my friend Noah has put together this great compilation, so I'm once again going to have vinyl that a friend of mine had a direct hand in, and every time I put that thing on the turntable, it's going to be like, man, Noah made this. Like, he's part of this. I've got him in my collection, so I'm pretty excited about that. So go check out the KBK. You'll find all the sites. You can get all the music. You can get digital downloads, whatever. But they've also got a T-shirt, which I hate to say it, I didn't buy the T-shirt because, my gosh, I can't fit any more T-shirts in my closet. I just can't do it. But maybe you can. Maybe you need a cool band T-shirt from a band like the KBK. And maybe once you hear this song from the KBK, you'll go buy the album, you'll go buy the T-shirt, and you'll go buy the awesome independently released vinyl album with some of the coolest bands that are playing in Alabama right now. So there you go. Check this music out, check the KBK out, and then stick around because we're going to talk about Avengers Endgame.
Planet Earth about to be recycled. Your only chance to evacuate is to leave with us.
Spoilers. If you have not yet seen Avengers Endgame, this episode is going to be loaded with spoilers. And also, don't complain, because obviously you don't care enough. Seriously.
That's right. It's been a week. What's wrong with you?
Yeah. And that's the thing is, like, I'm trying to be
nerd are you?
I'm trying to be respectful of everybody online, but at the same time, like if you haven't seen
that's
it,
not my gig.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's your whole thing is not being respectful of people online. But if you haven't seen it by the Monday after it came out, you don't care enough to have a right to complain about spoilers. Because my shit job has a horrible, horrible schedule, and I've never missed seeing a movie I really wanted to see on opening weekend. So if I can do it, anybody can do it.
True.
But speaking of Avengers Endgame, we had to bring in some of our best and brightest of the Needless Things Irregulars to break this movie down. First of all, I want to welcome back to the show our head of research, Ryan Schweck. How are you doing tonight?
Good. Glad to be here and talk about a movie that I realized have characters that have been around for 25% of my life. Which is kind of a weird thought.
Yeah. That is an odd... I mean, the characters have been around for forever, but the on-screen representations,
That's
kind of nutty.
And
we're old.
Of course, this delightful voice you're hearing, the third voice, the third man in the show, Arian, we just couldn't do it without your dark, cynical take on the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I will go ahead and confirm for everyone, I did like Infinity War better.
You're crazy.
Yeah?
I agree.
Wow.
I actually thought it, there are a few things about, we'll get to it, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll break that down because, all honesty, now that I've thought about the thing that you just said, you're probably right. But we'll get to it. The first thing I want to do is lay down some ground rules. One, we are not going to discuss the nature and the what-ifs of the time travel established in Endgame. We can discuss what they established, but I don't want to get into, well, what if they took the Soul Stone back to where the Time Stone went, and then an alternate timeline from there? But we can't get into that. That would be a whole other episode. That would be our what if episode.
You mean we're not going to go down the wormhole of according to the rules that they established because Loki got away with the Space Stone in 2012 that they're fucked now?
Well, no, that's an okay thing because that's something that actually happened in the movie. So we can kind of look at the ramifications of that.
I think we shouldn't.
It does make my head hurt a little bit when I think about it.
It's timey-wimey BS, and yeah.
And thanks so much to Stephen Moffat for introducing that annoying phrase into the lexicon.
Timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly.
The other rule is that there are three of us, so everybody just be conscious of that. When you express your thought, keep it concise, and then be ready for everybody else to share their input on it. And with that, we will move on into Avengers Endgame. And actually, I think real quick we can probably cover the possibility that Infinity War was better. When you said it, I was shocked. But it actually does make sense because in the end, if you lay it down sort of important beat by important beat, Endgame was pretty predictable.
Yeah, well, it's so...
Like in the best way possible.
Right. No, the last hour of it, or really the last half of it is in the best way possible. The beginning of Endgame is disjointed to me. It's kind of weird. Yeah. So because it's, for one thing, and this was talking to you the other day, it made me realize this. This movie is kind of oddly... It wants to be James Gunny, and that's not a thing that the Russo brothers are good at.
I agree with that.
It's the Russo... I actually enjoy the Russo brothers a whole lot. I think they're great. Their two Captain America movies are my favorite. I know you disagree. That's okay.
I agree that they're your favorite.
So we're back in agreement. Excellent. So yeah, it's when it starts after Clint's farm, that's when it starts to go off the rails a little bit to me. Like it starts with some music, which it seemed like they tried to use music more in this movie than any other Marvel movie, other than the Guardians and Guardians 2.
I'm not a huge fan of non.
It did not work for me.
I'm not a big fan of non. I think it's diegetic is the word, which means music that is not coming from a source within the movie.
Right.
I'm not a big fan of that in Marvel movies, and it happened in Captain Marvel, and in rewatching all the movies, because we've gone back and rewatched everything over the last couple of weeks, and it happens in Guardians, but it's coming, like, it'll start in Star-Lord's tape player and then pull back and be the score of the scene, so it does at least have an origin within the film, whereas here
it's just kind of
just playing it out of nowhere,
right?
And it's weird to me. How do you feel about it, Ryan?
Yeah, it's out of place. And kind of, I think that goes along with a lot of things I thought about it. The more I've thought about the movie, there are some scenes in this movie that I think are amazing. Like, chill bumps, whatever. But I walked out of it thinking, I don't know if I liked it as a movie. Like, I didn't come out of it thinking that was a great movie. Like, with Winter Soldier, you walk out, that's a great movie. Mm-hmm. This, I was like, man, there were a lot of good scenes in that movie. And I think it's because this movie was the third act to all of the MCU.
Yes.
And so you've got 3 hours of, the little bit in the beginning, just like when you have a play, reacting to the end of Act 2 and then the climax. And so that's not meant to be a full movie.
No.
Which is fine. I mean, they did what they had to do, but so you get stuff like that. You get weird, music beds that are just tiebacks to other things and that kind of thing. So I'm kind of still thinking about that. I'm curious to watch it when I can sit and watch a whole bunch of stuff in a row.
Yeah, I will say this, that in watching all, 23 movies now?
22?
In proximity to one another, there is a lot that was obviously set up to lead to Endgame, and there's a lot that they kind of retroactively incorporated into what happened in Endgame. Mm-hmm. And it was all very smart. Like, nothing happens and you're like, oh, that was cheap, or that was corny, or like, yeah, whatever. Like,
there was one thing that did, but we'll get to that.
Okay, well, yeah, there was a moment in the movie that made me roll my eyes so hard they almost fell out of my head. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that sensitive topic a little bit later. But it's really impressive as the let's tie everything up, because they, as far as that goes, they
did a great job with it.
Yeah, they accomplished so much more than I was really expecting, as far as Tony's dad, Thor's mom, like all the little bits and pieces that I feel like the Russos and McFeely and I can't remember the other writer's name, but I feel like they really looked back and said, let's figure out every potential loose end, every emotional Marcus is the other writer. But let's make sure we touch on anything that seems significant that maybe didn't get a proper feeling of closure. Mm-hmm. And with Thor, and actually I want to talk about Thor a little bit. Thor's mother, Frigga, dying in Thor the Dark World, she got a funeral, but essentially Thor never really dealt with her death.
Yeah, well, Thor hadn't really dealt with a lot of things.
Right, exactly. Like, we saw a little bit of it in Infinity War, but in this one, we saw a guy who had just lost his shit, and the first time through, obviously Fat Thor is a hilarious visual, and it's taken every bit of my willpower to not post things about Fat Thor on social media for the past week. But
will Fat Thor be the new Deadpool at DragonCon this year.
Oh,
that's
for sure, because all of us have the right kind of body to be Fat Thor.
Right.
Like
I was going to say, like, even if you did make Lebowski Thor jokes on social media, Red Ranger wouldn't get them, so it's okay.
Well, that's true. That's true. But the first time through, I was like, oh, look at Fat Thor. That's a funny visual. I still don't know how I feel about Thor using modern phrases and lingo and jargon and whatever, and the humor that they've decided to give him. But then the second time through, for whatever reason, this version of Thor really clicked for me. And I think it's because I can see a trajectory where he gets back to being the really, like, lust for battle, fun Thor. Like, yeah. I can sort of see a character arc really coming out of this that leads somewhere good. How did you guys feel about Fat Thor? Was he too goofy, or did it work?
Here's why it didn't work for me. Basically, this is Thor with PTSD.
Right.
And Marvel, like, the MCU has already, like, delved it. And, like, not everybody experiences PTSD the same way. Let's go ahead and put that out there. But as far as a subject to talk about, like, within the MCU, they've done a really great job of it with Tony's PTSD and Iron Man 3 and Infinity War, and in this movie and in other stuff. This was just like, hey, Thor's freaking out, it's funny. And then, like, that was kind of it. I don't know. Like, I am not opposed to having Thor be funny. Like, I'm not even opposed to having Thor be a fat drunk. It just didn't click for me.
See, it worked for me because this second time through, I really picked up on the despair and the just lost hopelessness that is very different from what Tony experienced, and obviously he handles it differently than Tony. But it's a more personal, Tony's PTSD basically came from finding out he was not, in fact, the center of the universe.
Right.
Thor's came from finding out that he didn't and couldn't save the day. Like, it was a different kind of failure.
He couldn't hero his way out of everything.
Right.
Okay, but didn't we deal with that with him, like, and this is where I got kind of weird about it, like, the end of Ragnarok, that is what that's about. That he has, like, accepted the loss, and then at the end, he realizes, I've, got to suck it up and be the leader and lead Asgard.
I almost feel like the last, like, Infinity War in this movie kind of did Thor's character a disservice because he was at maybe an interesting place as King of Asgard and finally accepting it and, like, dealing with the loss and, like you said, taking responsibility. But then, like, they basically had to have Thanos show up and wreck Asgard, like the Asgardian refugees, because they had one of the Infinity Stones. So there was just, like, they were a casualty of the overarching plot, almost.
But see, to me, that's what makes it interesting, because in comics, this is what happens, is our heroes work and suffer and triumph and then fall again and work and suffer and triumph. Like, it's a never-ending cycle. And Thor, being the most sort of, like, classical and Shakespearean of these heroes, it seems right to me that he doesn't get to say, you know what, I've got all this figured out, let's go forward. Like, I kind of like the fall again. And especially such a massive one. And also, because of it being the Asgardians and being fresh off of Ragnarok, it really brought Thanos' actions home in a way that nothing else really would have. Like, we just saw these people survive an apocalypse, and then Big Purple Guy comes along and fucks it all up.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. All I can say is that it did not work for me.
Well, then let's move on.
I will say on Thor, I am glad though they resisted the temptation. Like I kept waiting for him to like lift Stormbreaker and get lightning and get his 6-pack back.
Yes.
And then just move on. And I
did
kept
appreciate
waiting.
that.
And I like they stuck with it.
Yeah. That was fantastic. And by the way, I will buy 3 different versions of Fat Thor if they make figures of them.
I'll buy like if they have one that does kind of look like the dude, like in the bathrobe or whatever. I'll get that.
I am hopeful they'll do a 3-pack of Lebowski Thor, Karg in his Hawaiian shirt,
and Meek.
And wait, what's the little one's name?
Meek.
Yeah, and I hope they come with a little TV with Fortnite on it. Although I did like.
What's his name? New
Wait.
Boy 69 or whatever.
Yeah,
Nude
Boy 69. Nude Boy
Yeah.
69. It's Thor again. Which was exactly the type of shit I hated in Ragnarok, but and I didn't really care for it here, but it was so little of it, it wasn't overwhelming. So character-wise, Ryan, who stood out to you in this one in a good or bad way?
All right, let's start with bad. I do not appreciate or didn't like that we just kind of glossed over whatever the hell happened with the Hulk. Like, I'm fine with you mixing it up and making, like a combination of Professor Hulk, Mr. Green, whatever. But that can't be like such a huge plot point in Infinity War that they got to work some stuff out. They got to, whatever reason Hulk is hiding. And then in the next movie, it's just like, and we worked it out, we made up, and now I control Hulk this well.
But at the same time, do you want to grind this movie to a halt with a laboratory scene that really we know where it's going?
Yeah, that bothered me as well. But like, I also I understand that like it's already 3 hours long. Like you're already doing a lot, and like there are characters. Like I feel like of the original 6, I really liked what they did with half of them, and to varying degrees. Like the other half, I did not enjoy as much. And Hulk was one of the ones that I didn't really enjoy. It didn't really bother me because I kind of know why they did it, just because of like. Like Dave said, they could have like a 5-minute scene going into it, but if they did, then like then the movie's like 5 minutes longer, and it's already running over long. And like honestly, I would rather just have like 5 more minutes of awesome battle scene during awesome battle scene. I know this makes me bad, but that's just me. I'm far more annoyed with Nat and Thor. So
yeah, and I didn't hate the Professor Hulk persona. Some people didn't like it. I thought it was fine.
No, I was fine with it. I because this is and actually this is the movie where I really had to admit that Mark Ruffalo is a better choice than Ed Norton, because Ed Norton couldn't have done any of that.
No.
And the only time Smart Hulk annoyed me was when they went back to New York and he did the little fake smashing thing. Like, and look, it was funny, but it was also like, all right, enough of this goofy shit.
With Hulk, I was kind of the opposite how I was at Thor. Like, I really wanted them and was waiting for them to make him go savage again. And like in that, like I would have liked to seen in that final battle, he had to let go and become Savage Hulk again.
Right.
That would have been cool.
But you know what? At the same time, why not save that for later?
And they may.
Because now we've got Smart Hulk, and it was a big, massive battle with lots going on, everybody doing specific things, and he really didn't have any business that was his. So save that moment for a future movie where it really will have impact, as opposed to here where there's so much other shit going on, they wouldn't really be able to give it the focus it deserves. Because honestly, that could be a whole movie.
Yeah.
Not that we're going to get a Hulk movie,
Yeah,
but
if Warner Brothers lets them,
or no, Universal.
Universal.
Yeah,
I
Universal.
It is.
So, but yeah, I think we're pretty much in agreement though. Smart Hulk was pretty fun, not overly annoying.
Yeah.
As a character, it was fun. Like I just wish they had done more to explore the backstory of how he became Smart Hulk.
I think the scene in the diner where Paul Rudd says, "I'm so confused." I think what more do we need? And by the way, I just want to say the acting in this thing. These people were, and you know, more MCU movies. It's always at least good. But I felt like everybody just acted their asses off in this movie, and Paul Rudd in particular, being sort of connective tissue for everybody in a way, from his reaction to seeing his daughter, to when he gets pissed off at Tony later on, to where, I mean, I feel like he was fantastic. Everybody was, but Rudd in particular, really, I was impressed.
The only thing that I questioned about Ant-Man is, when did Ant-Man get smarter? I was like, wait a second. There were times he was like helping build some stuff.
Well, no, he's an electrical engineer.
He is.
He has not a PhD. He's got a master's in electrical engineering or whatever. Which I didn't. And you know what? That would have bothered the shit out of me because I didn't remember that until we watched Ant-Man again, and I was like, oh shit, he is like he's not a genius.
Yeah.
But he's not a dum-dum that's just wearing that suit around. Like, he does, you know, he's the one who altered it to get out of the quantum realm. Like, he does...
That's true.
He does have some smarts.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought he did really well. And I like seeing Cassie grown up. That was good.
So the first... my first time around, since there were 27 minutes of trailers before the movie... I got up to run to the bathroom as soon as, like, a trailer started. I was like, well, shit, I'm going to go ahead and go now and get it out. And then by the time I got back, I missed the whole entire opening scene with Hawkeye.
Oh, God.
Because it was, whatever the trailer was, it was like a super short one. And so I missed that whole scene, but Jen told me, she leaned over and was like, his Hawkeye was doing the thing. It was basically the thing from the trailer.
Right.
And then his family disappears. So I got the gist of it, but I got to say, actually seeing it really did make a huge difference in Clint's character for me this time around because he basically becomes the Punisher in this movie.
Yep.
And his arc is so good because, one, he's always been, you know, you can ask our pal Beth, he's the joke of the team in a way. But at the same time is the sort of more mortal one that's holding them together. But he's made it through all these movies, even Age of Ultron, which murdered a character just to go, ha-ha, you thought it was going to be Hawkeye. So he survived all this stuff.
Also because Joss Whedon likes killing people.
Yeah, that too. And we get to see, when it comes to that huge scene with the Soul Stone and our old pal Red Skull, that was almost tough to watch.
Yeah. I really enjoyed Clint's arc throughout this movie. Like, I thought they did a really good job, and I for one, can't wait for Beth's review and acknowledgement of Hawkeye's greatness.
I feel like at this point, she kind of has to admit defeat.
She does.
Because he was great. He was critical. But let's talk about that big scene with the Soul Stone. Because I, for one, love that... I feel like they served Natasha's character because it's so important when she says, this is all I've been doing for 5 years.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We know how she feels about her life. We know how she feels about what she's done in the past, her need for redemption. We know that at this point, her only purpose, and you can see it a bit in her desperation when they do the scene with her talking to Rocket and Carol. Yeah, they're having the meeting. You can see she's just desperate to do something to keep everybody together and to give them all a purpose. And I really felt like it was a great decision, and to give Hawkeye the opportunity to get back to his family and not do the trite, like, oh, well, he's got to die and never see him again to save the day.
Yeah. And I think, for her, it all goes back to that whole thing with her about the ledger. And she's always trying to clear her ledger.
Exactly.
All the red on her ledger. And so they, finally let her do it. I kind of wish it had been Hawkeye, like narratively. I like Hawkeye. He's one of my favorites. But I think it would have been, I don't know. There's just something about that scene where I felt like Hawkeye was a better one to, if he could say, like, go back and save him, whatever, sacrifice for his family. But that's me.
Yeah, I just feel like that would have been the obvious movie choice.
Yeah. Now I say,
supposedly it was at first, and they changed it after somebody weighed in and said it should be Nat, and then everybody kind of was convinced, and it ended up being Nat. I will say, I liked everything leading up to her sacrifice and her sacrifice. I thought, it, and I know this is one of Dave's least favorite things ever is Family Guy. But
it sure is.
It reminded me of how everyone in Family Guy treats Meg, the daughter, because they came back and everybody was like, "Oh, she's dead," and Hulk threw a bench, and then they're like, "Okay, back to it." So
well, I mean, what are they again? Are they going to grind the whole thing to a halt to have a funeral?
No, but they also I feel like maybe during Tony's funeral they could have acknowledged it somehow. Yes, they had the scene by the lake, and they did acknowledge it briefly, but I feel like that was post-funeral, and it was very brief, and it was also talking about Vision in addition to Nat, and Vision had been dead for a while, so I don't know. I feel like if Nat's one of the major 6 characters that you're focusing the movie on, and they did because they gave them a special acknowledgement during the credits, then it maybe would have been cool to have her acknowledged a little bit more, her passing and sacrifice acknowledged a little bit more. I don't know.
I don't disagree, but I just don't think the movie's pacing and time allowed for it. And yeah, it sucks, but at the same time, her sacrifice was so significant. Tony did what he did, but it was a spur of the moment, got to do it now. It's either I do this or it's all over. And Steve, I mean, he got a classic happy ending. He got an amazing finish, so there's no tragedy to his.
Yeah. Now
whereas without hers, nothing works. Nothing her sacrifice was significant enough that was her moment.
Well, I think just real world wise, you're saying goodbye to Robert Downey Jr., whereas Scarlett Johansson
is getting a TV show. Or no,
we're
getting
a movie.
Getting a movie.
We're going to see her in a movie. And I mean, not that story wise that has anything to do with it,
right.
But as far as the MCU goes, they're going to do that.
What's funny about that scene by the lake is they're talking and it's really nice because Clint says, "I wish there was a way to let her know that we won," which is such a perfect sentiment for everything that had happened. And then Wanda says, "Well, she knows. They both know." And my first thought was, "Oh, she's remembering her brother who fucking died." And then I was like, "Oh, nope, she's talking about Vision. We don't even care about Quicksilver anymore."
Yeah, who?
How did they not? And I tried to think.
I'm sorry. His name is it still? Does it still have to be Pietro Maximoff, or can they call him Quicksilver now?
No.
Who knows?
How did they not? If they're going to do time travel, at least show the respect to somehow show Quicksilver. I know there wasn't an Infinity Stone around a lot right then, but come on, guys. show him some respect.
Well,
please.
shit, my wish was that they'd somehow bring him back, although at the same time, I very much respect that they didn't cheat and bring back, which they did with Gamora, but that almost had to happen. Like, it wasn't even they figured out a way to do it. It was just part of the story they were telling. But they didn't do a cheat and bring back, characters who had died and who were dead. Like they said about Thor's mother, like, she's gone. But there are a lot of people who are kind of gone, and we've got to do this for them. Like, I appreciate that they drew that line in the storytelling.
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious to see, that last Infinity Wars crossover in the comic book was about them getting Gamora out of the Soul Stone.
Oh, are there comics about this?
No.
Cool. I'd like to read those.
But I think it's interesting, but it is that last arc is about, like, Gamora that's outside the stone, and part of Gamora's soul is inside the stone. And it's about them bringing her soul back together.
Huh.
And so I kind of wonder if they might go that way somehow, which I kind of don't want to see them do. But
yeah, because here's my call as far as that goes. I think the stones are done. I don't think we'll see them in the movies again. I don't think they'll even really be referenced unless something in Far From Home, because according to Feige, that's actually the end of this whole thing. But I think they have to put the stones to bed at this point, because
I hope so.
Anything else will be problematic for their storytelling in the future.
Yeah.
So we got, Nat got her incredible, noble send-off that was touching, and we mentioned Tony and we mentioned Steve. And honestly, I don't know that there's a whole lot to discuss there. Again, the acting on both of their parts was just absolutely, those guys were at the top of their game. Robert Downey Jr., man, at the beginning, after they first brought him back from space, which, by the way, I think I'd like to establish this with you guys, since I consider us an expert panel. Carol went and got Tony and Nebula because the scene at the end of Infinity War at the end of Captain Marvel, the post-credit scene, like, that happened prior to this movie. Or not prior to this movie, but during the 5 years, like, that scene drops in right before she goes to get Tony from space.
Right.
That was my assumption.
Yeah,
and
that's part of why I feel like the beginning of the movie is kind of disjointed. I don't know. Like, everything up until the 5-year jump feels like a little weird to me.
It does, but I love that they had the 5-year jump, and that there was consequence. That, yes, they got everybody back, but 5 years passed, and they didn't just get to erase what happened. Everybody remembers it. Everybody knows. Everybody knows this madman from another world did this. Like, it's very interesting to me that they didn't just go back in time and correct it. That there's still scars.
Well, and I'm curious moving forward, and Far From Home is the first movie after, if it does take place after this movie and kind of movie, they're going to have to talk about, like, people were gone for 5 years. You're going to have all sorts of weird stuff, like people getting remarried and your kids being older. Like, the world is way screwed up now.
Which, to be fair, they're probably not going to dip too far into that kind of stuff. But I'm sure there will be, repercussions at the superhero level that they'll discuss.
Yeah, it's going to be it's going to be weird. Like, I thought of, like, a whole bunch of weird shit. So, like, apparently people came back where they were, but, like, so if someone got snapped while they were in a plane in the middle of the sky, are they going to, like, come back in the middle of the sky?
Well, there's a line that specifically says bring them back safe.
Okay.
So I think that kind of covers that in a shorthand, you know?
All right.
I would love to see the MCU pick up and just be all weird and depressing like The Leftovers on HBO. Like, just horrifying.
That's what the the first, once they like made the initial 5-year jump, like all that footage reminded me of The Leftovers, like just trash everywhere, and like people are sad the Mets are gone. I would have been stoked the Mets were gone, but I hate the Mets. So that's just me. But yeah, I don't know. It was a really weird and jarring, like, tonal shift from what we'd had before, and then the MCU movies, which were mostly kind of lighthearted and fun. And
but they have the capability to get dark and to get a little ugly and disturbing, which parts of Thor Ragnarok would have been if some ass clown hadn't been in charge of it. Which, by the way, I would totally sign up for other things from that ass clown. If Taika Waititi wants to do like a Gwenpool movie, I'm all about it. That would be perfect. But just keep him away from anything that needs to be taken seriously in any way.
Yeah. See, you take Thor. I feel like as a baseline level, you took Thor way more seriously than I did.
Oh, yeah, apparently so.
Yeah.
So Steve gets his. We have known from the beginning his relationship with Peggy was so important, and then in this movie they took the care and the time to drop down to reinforce it, to show the compass, to have the office scene, to like if you watch this movie. You know what's going to happen. It has to happen. The way that they establish Peggy, if it had ended any other way, we'd be shitting on the whole movie at this point.
Right. And that was his vision from Scarlet Witch and Age of Ultron.
Yes.
That he got to dance with her again.
Yes.
I like to think of the implications of Sharon Carter and what this means. I know we were going to talk about the time stuff. And I know they said it's another dimension. Whatever.
Oh,
just let me have my headcanon that Sharon Carter is in love with her uncle. And like
it's oh yeah, that's actually a good point. Yeah, because when he started to have feelings for Sharon, he actually didn't know that she was Peggy's niece or great niece or whatever it was at the time. Yeah. Because she didn't reveal that until the funeral.
Yeah, there's all sorts of weird stuff going on with that even more now.
Yeah, it does
but
make that.
But bad Sharon kind of got the shaft too. They were kind of building her up there for a couple of movies, like he was gonna move on. And that's one thing. Yeah, we know. I know that needs to be his happy ending and what they've all kind of led to. But I also kind of liked how over Winter Soldier and Civil War, he kind of came to terms with moving on.
Yeah.
Like it almost takes away from that scene. It's in Civil War, right? Yeah, where she's in the hospital. It takes away from that scene now that he's happy for that she moved on. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff where they never show him, so it could be him and blah, blah, blah. But I like that, like, Steve realizing that she was happy and that's okay and he's got to move forward. I don't know.
Yeah, and you're right. And there's several instances throughout the history of the MCU at this point where you can look and see where they sort of course corrected.
Yeah.
I think at one point they were probably planning on him moving on, but this gives Chris Evans, the out
right
that he wanted and that his character deserves in a way that, let's say he marries Sharon and retires. Like that's not satisfying.
Yeah, that's The Dark Knight Rises.
Nobody
liked that crap.
Right.
His whole thing was that he was a man out of time. So
yeah,
I thought like his arc and Tony's arc, they just completely nailed perfectly. Like even like going back to the first Avengers movie where Cap's talking to Tony and he's like, "You're not going to be the one to make the sacrifice play to lay down on a lay down on a wire or a grenade so that someone can crawl over you. And like, yes, Tony proves him wrong in at the end of the first Avengers to an extent, but then he proves that he's willing to pay the ultimate price, even when now he's got even more to live for, which I thought was a great end for his character. And having Pepper, like, I do not care for Gwyneth Paltrow the person, but her portrayal of Pepper Potts has always been okay by me.
Well, let's just go ahead and say if Gwyneth Paltrow ever encountered an Infinity Stone, she would sleep with it in her vagina.
Yes, this is as the meme says. Yeah, like her portrayal of Pepper has always been fine by me. She and Downey had good chemistry on screen. So having her tell Tony, I thought having her tell Tony, you can rest now, it's going to be okay, was perfect, instead of saying, I love you, I'll always love you.
Yeah.
Like, she told him what he needed to hear, which was, it's okay that you're done. Because to Tony's mind, the world needs him, because he is a narcissist in a lot of ways. And, like, he can't possibly fathom the world not needing him in order to function.
Well,
She's giving him an out and telling him it's okay. You can go now.
I kind of like it as like a meta line about Robert Downey Jr. too.
Yeah, yeah.
It's okay.
Also
like we can move on from the MCU without Tony Stark now.
Just to give Downey more props, the two scenes that really worked for me, or that I thought he really stood out in, were one, the death scene where he's not. There are no quips. He is fucked up and dying.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't say anything cute or snarky. He has been destroyed. And he really played that amazingly well. And then I mentioned it quickly before, but his freak out at Steve after he's been brought back, when he's in the hooked up to the IV and everything, is just phenomenal. And I told you we needed to build a suit of armor around the world, and you said when we failed, we'd fail together, and now here we are. Dude, his delivery, and I'm assuming they used some CG to make him look all like skeletal and fucked up. But, man, that was just, that's one of my favorite Tony moments ever, because it gives you, after watching Civil War and kind of leaning towards, man, Steve's right, it brings it back, and it's like, oh shit, Tony was kind of right too. Even though the movie presents both sides relatively objectively, it is nice to have it come back around and be like, yeah, but Tony had a point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the armor around the world I liked. I mean, I'm not sure what Ultron would have done to stop any of this.
Well, if Ultron had worked, it would have been sort of a sentient defense system comprised of Ultron and the Iron Legion, and it could have, it potentially could have made a difference.
Yeah.
But as Steve points out, well, that didn't work out so well. Right. Let's move on to the interesting fact that, I guess the tongue-in-cheek fact that Endgame several times points out that Back to the Future is bullshit, and yet is totally an homage to Back to the Future. Right down to the going into the past and having to do the heist around the characters that exist in the past. And like, oh shit, look, it's that scene from the old movie. Like, I love that they acknowledged it and then leaned into it.
Yeah, especially listing all the time travel movies. Because it's almost like, from a movie maker perspective, it keeps you from, when they start introducing it, like, getting pulled away from the movie by thinking about all that.
Right.
They're like, hey, we're just going to go ahead and list them for you.
We're going to go ahead and explain to you how everything you know doesn't work for this movie, so you can stop thinking about it.
Yeah, and I know you're going ahead and you're thinking about Biff Tanner World, but guess what? Back to the Future's bullshit.
Right.
So stop thinking about it.
Right.
Move
on.
Right.
Yeah, I've got to say, I think I love that they established, no, the past does not change our future. I think that was very smart. and then the time travel itself. Man, I mean, it was as Scott Lang called it. It was a time heist, and it was so much fun to watch.
Yeah. I found it interesting online because, there's so many people bitching about the time travel, and that's not how time travel works, blah, blah, blah.
Right. That's not how real time travel works.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I didn't notice your PhD in time travel there, smart guy.
Well,
Tell me, when you time travel, how does it work?
If you
Please proceed.
Like Marvel comic books, though, that is exactly how time travel works in Marvel.
Oh, is it?
This is how Days of Future Past happens. Like, that's the big surprise at the end of Days of Future Past is she goes back and the future is still just like that. You cannot change it. And that's how Bishop and Cable and all of it work. Like, this is how time travel in Marvel works. They didn't invent anything new.
I gotta say, Don Cheadle's delivery of "Why don't we just go back when Thanos was a baby," and his miming what looked to me to be taking the umbilical cord and strangling baby Thanos with it.
Don Cheadle, he has gotten progressively better and better. I think out of anyone, he has gotten funnier and funnier. Who his character is as it's gone on. The line in Infinity War where he makes, who does he make bow to T'Challa?
Oh, Scott.
Scott.
It's Bruce. It's Bruce.
Oh, it is Bruce. That's right.
That is one of my favorite moments in that whole movie. Because not when he says it, but just when he bows and then he goes, "Man, come on, man." And keeps going.
He screws with him after he does it.
Yeah.
I thought... Another thing that I really enjoyed with Cheadle as Rhodey in this movie was when he and Nebula are on the planet and watching Star-Lord in 2014, dancing around, and
so he's an idiot.
He looks at her and just goes, "So he's an idiot," and she just says, "Yeah."
Oh yeah, and you know what? Also, while we're talking about performances, Karen Gillan. Fantastic in this.
Yeah, she was super great.
I mean, just Nebula is just a seething ball of emotion and rage, and and also disconnected from everything in a way too.
Well, and she plays like that traumatic, like someone that's come from abuse so well. You see it. She doesn't let people touch her. You see her desperate to make connections. Karen Gillan's really good at making that where you can see she wants to be connected to people, but because of her past, just can't do it.
Well, and the movie itself, I picked this up the second time through, and I didn't really catch it the first time. When after 2014, Nebula has the vision or whatever, the memory connection. Thanos walks over to her, puts that blade, doesn't even touch her, uses his bloody weapon to lift her head up, and then looks at Gamora and says, "Bring her to my ship." Doesn't say to Nebula, "Come to my ship, come with me, doesn't even speak to her. I mean, it just shows you the lack of regard and the lack of his. He doesn't even recognize her sentience hardly. That to me was almost the saddest scene in the whole movie is how fucked up that relationship was. And then later on, when she says she talks about being so desperate to please him all the time, man, that stuff is dark.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that scene with her and Gamora, where she says, "Eventually we're friends," and you can see that Gamora, the 2014 Gamora, being mean to her again and dismissing her is super hurtful to her, and you see it God, we did all this in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and we've moved forward past this, and now I'm back again to she hates me, and it's the only person I wanted to love me. Yeah, I really like Nebula. she has had a really good arc over all the movies.
Yeah, they've done a great job with her, and I look forward to seeing more of her. What else? What else have we got? Arian, was there anything specific that you had in notes or wanted to talk about?
Geez. So I mentioned that this movie reminded me of Return of the King.
And you're not. Oh yeah, and you know what? I think we lost that in our in our cutout. So yeah.
It reminds me of Return of the King in that it's got an air of inevitability to it. Not like it didn't follow the source material as closely as the Lord of the Rings movies did. So like there's obvious, like it's a kind of hodgepodge of a bunch of different comic series doing stuff, and like even within this movie you get like subtle callbacks to different comic moments. Like where Hulk's kind of holding up a mountain to protect people, or Cap leans in and says "Hail Hydra." But
that was fantastic.
Yeah, that was because when he gets in the elevator, you immediately call back to Winter Soldier,
right? It's
elevator scene, and but instead he just screws with them, and he's just like, "I'm going to get this without having to kick anybody's ass," and then he does, and it's great, but. It had an air of inevitability to it because you kind of Marvel's not gonna like not make another Black Panther movie after it made $1 billion. Like, and Chadwick Boseman is signed on for X amount of movies. Like these are all things that people know. Like,
well, okay. So speaking of Black Panther 2, which we know they're gonna make. I feel they pretty clearly laid out that it's going to be Namor. Like,
they may have hinted it. I don't know if they clearly laid it out.
I think those rumors have been around so long that
I get bored with fish stuff. I don't know. It's just me. But like I can't ever get into Namor. I can't ever get into Superman. I can't ever get into Aquaman. These are my failings. As a comic book fan.
Yeah, but MCU is going to do something interesting.
Yeah, I know. There was a great meme that I saw where somebody said, who would have had no problem beating Thanos, and it was like silhouette of the Justice League. And I don't want to cause a war here, but then someone tweeted beneath it, let them beat Rotten Tomatoes first.
Yeah, that's accurate. That's accurate.
Anyway, so yeah, the movie. I feel like we need to talk about. To me, this movie was like, in a lot of ways, the most comic booky of all. If that's an adjective,
well,
is that an adjective?
Really quickly, I want to address something that you mentioned, though, in that at the end of Infinity, there's this really cynical take and. Color me shocked that it's coming from you.
Sure.
That the ending of Infinity War wasn't effective because we all know they're going to bring these people
effective.
back.
It was gutting as hell at the time when it happened. Like it was super effective, but like there was always a part in my brain that's like, it's like they're going to do something, whether it's time travel or everybody's actually trapped in the Soul Stone. And not actually dead. Or
see, and to me, that's
something.
The interesting part. Sure, we know they're not gone, but I'm dying to see how they come back.
No,
and
for sure.
A lot of people, don't get that, and it's the same people who say, "Well, what's the point of a prequel? Well, who asked for Solo? Why do we do that?" Well, it's because it's interesting to see the story. Like. I'm interested in the journey, even if I know the end. Like, Titanic didn't make $1 billion because nobody knew how it ended.
Yeah.
And it made $1 billion because everyone wanted to see Kate Winslet's boobs.
Well, it made $1 billion because people are suckers. But
I loved how they used those expectations too to set up people not expecting Black Widow. Like, they knew what they were doing when they announced that movie not that long ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Just because...
Also, maybe Nebula could have mentioned to them, like, you guys are going to the planet with the Soul Stone where my sister didn't come back from, so maybe be careful.
She did.
I don't know.
No, she did.
Did she?
She didn't.
Okay.
She didn't know exactly what happened, but that's. Yeah. Remember when they were having the meeting? She said, they're going to the planet that's the axis of death in the universe. Thanos went there, and my sister.
Okay.
And my sister
you're right,
didn't come back, and then Scott goes, "Not it."
Yeah. No, you're right.
I've got it. Ryan, were there any specific things you wanted to touch on before we get into our own end game?
A couple things. In the battle, the big final battle, I think probably the biggest goosebumps feelings I got in the whole movie, and probably in all of the MCU, was when they finally let him say Avengers Assemble. And I think it was amazing that they've held off on that for that long.
Yeah.
And it made that moment so much more powerful to finally get to hear the whole sentence said, and it didn't come off cheesy or terrible either.
Yeah, he didn't lift his shield up in the air and yell it. It worked.
Yeah, it was played perfectly. What was not played so perfectly?
Oh, is it time?
It's time. Okay, there's been a lot written about the A-Force scene. And if you don't know, A-Force is the all-female Avengers.
She's got help.
Yeah. I don't mind. It's not that I don't mind them all teaming up and coming together. It's just when it happened, it's done so blatantly and makes no sense with the rest of the battle going on whatsoever that all of a sudden we're all right here and we're all together. I don't know.
Hey, ladies, let's all meet up on the left side of the battlefield at 5:45, and we're going to do a big photo shoot scene, okay? Is that cool with everybody? That's what that felt like. And it
really did. Here's the... So I rolled my eyes at it when it happened the first time, and I also rolled my eyes at it the second time I saw it. But it bothers me less because... especially more so the second time I saw it Sunday morning, and maybe because I saw it, there were way more kids in the theater Sunday morning at 10 a.m. than there were Thursday night at 10:15. But there were a noticeable amount of cheers, and it was high pitched. It was mostly kids.
So you're suggesting we should go by children's opinions?
No.
Of good filmmaking. So you're going to be in there for the Sonic movie, are you?
No. Can you shut up and let me finish making my point?
I apologize. Finish your point.
Thank you. My larger point is, yes, that was silly and contrived, and I rolled my eyes at it, but so was everything else that had happened in the previous 15. It's a frickin' superhero movie where in the previous installment, an actual line was, "These guys are from space, and they're here to steal a wizard's necklace." And that's funny. Now, yes, it's contrived. Yes, it's dumb. The only thing that really bothers me about it is that I think they did it to, maybe alleviate some of the criticism that they've had over the fact that they just now finally got around to having a female lead in their 21st MCU movie. And they're like, hey, see, we're totally down with the women's, and we love y'all, and please keep buying our tickets and stuff. But yes, it annoyed me, and I rolled my eyes at it, but so many things annoy me, and I roll my eyes at them. And at the end of the day, I'm just like, well, I didn't enjoy that scene, but I heard people that did, so it's just not for me.
Yeah. I will say one thing I did enjoy in the battle that kind of goes along with that. Did you catch Wasp calling him Cap?
Yes.
And Lang smirking at her?
Yeah.
That was perfect.
Because she kind of gave him shit.
Right.
For being their little lackey or whatever. And then that was a great moment. I mean, the battle itself, let's just talk about the Mjolnir.
Oh,
Captain
yes.
America.
No, that was my biggest mark out moment in the entire movie. Like On Your Left was cool too.
Yes, that was great.
But when Mjolnir comes through and hits him, and then you realize that it's not Thor.
Yeah.
Then you're just like, oh shit, yeah.
Yeah, both times the entire theater. That was the biggest reaction.
Yeah.
Both
and
times.
Thor's like, I knew it.
Yeah, which is funny because to me, Thor saying I knew it means he saw it move in Age of Ultron.
Right.
And because you see Thor react when it moves a little bit.
He's like, oh crap.
Yeah. So
like,
I
is
love
this
it.
dude worthy?
Right.
Yes, he is.
And of course he is.
I'll tell you, for Steve never holding the hammer, he sure figured out some sick hammer shield combos real fast. I was like, whoa.
Well, he's Captain America.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And then we actually, because here's the thing, is Infinity War managed to do a fantastic job of featuring all of those characters. Like, everybody got their share of screen time, but due to the nature of the story and the need to give Cap and Tony big send-offs, so many characters didn't get as much. It wasn't split as evenly as it was in Infinity War, because our story is about the main Avengers. But
and I'm actually okay with that.
Like, I'm okay with it too. I'm totally okay with it. But Wanda did get her moment.
No, she totally did.
She was about to finish Thanos off on her own if he hadn't done the rain-fire maneuver.
Yeah, if he hadn't called in airstrikes.
Right.
And I'm also glad that Carol wasn't there for the entire fight, because she's kind of like an easy mode button.
Right.
Like a Game Genie cheat, if you will. And like having her there meant that everyone would have had to work less to get to where they were up until that point. And also, like, she's the future of the Avengers, and Cap and Tony were the present at that point, and the movie should focus more on them.
Well, and they established within the movie very well why she wasn't there. I loved her line about, guess what? There are 1,000 worlds other than these that the same thing happened on, and they don't have you guys. Like,
right.
And then later on, when she's talking to Nat and says, you may not see me for a long time. There's a lot of trouble out there. So they didn't just save her for the end. They gave her a reason that until she realized that they had undone the snap, she didn't come back, because she was out there in those worlds, and at some point, all of a sudden, these people reappeared, and she was like, I better get back to Earth. Like,
right?
I loved that.
Now, I did end up thinking, though, because like you said, she's an easy button. I think it pointed out, like, moving forward with whatever movies they go with, she's overpowered.
Yeah.
I think they're going to have, like, by letting her have her binary powers all the time, they're going to run into some problems. And I kind of wish they had, and maybe they'll go back and do it where she can't do binary all the time, but it's going to be an issue at some point.
Well, I feel like if you introduce more powerful opposition for her, that might help. I think they will.
I don't think you even have to do that. I think this has been my statement about Superman for years now. If you have good writers, it's good. It doesn't matter what the character is. It doesn't matter what the powers are. Nothing matters but having good writers. And for the most part, the MCU has been doing that for 11 years now. Yeah. So I'm not worried about her being overpowered. Whatever they do, they'll figure it out and it'll work.
Yeah, I have supreme faith in Kevin Feige at this point. He gets it.
Yeah,
to the extent.
He might know what he's doing. Maybe.
Yeah.
Real quick, I got a few things I want to cover here and get you guys input on them just from my notes. At the end, Steve goes back, and I noticed this time around that he obviously told Bucky what he was going to do. I didn't catch that the first time because there's shit tons of stuff you don't catch the first time.
I did not see that.
Yeah, because he tells Bucky, or Bucky tells him, "I'm going to miss you, man," even though they've just said he'll be gone 5 seconds.
Yeah, Bucky knows.
And then when Steve doesn't come back, Bucky doesn't react. He just turns around and looks at that bench. And that also explains the nod that Bucky gives Sam when Steve gives Sam the shield. So, a lot of people may feel like, oh, I really kind of thought we were going to get Bucky Captain America. But to me, the Bucky that they've established and the world that they've established, his character is just too dirty to be Captain America. And I've always said that I felt like Sam was the one. And they've handled that really nicely because Bucky is and always will be Steve's best friend. He's the one guy that Steve told, this is what I'm going to do. He wouldn't even tell Sam about Peggy.
See, I don't even think he told him.
No, he did.
You think Bucky just knew?
If you watch it, it's very clear when they have their little exchange, it's clear they are in on something that everybody else isn't. I think there was an off-screen conversation, but it's, again, Bucky gets to be Cap's best friend ever. Sam gets to be Captain America. Like, they figured out a way to, for me anyway, they figured out a way to make that work within the story so that nobody feels slighted.
Yeah, and it sure changes what that show may be about.
Right.
I'm very interested now. I mean, like I wasn't before, but yeah, now is it going to be Falcon trains as Captain America, or I don't know.
Yeah, whatever it is very exciting now because, there's still that dynamic. Will you move your seat up? No. Like, there's still a little bit of that there, but there's also, wow, we both have this relationship with this hero that's not around anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see. I loved bringing. Oh, go ahead.
I really appreciate the Russos gave Jon Favreau a really good scene at the end.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
They tied to Iron Man 1 with the cheeseburger thing. And, I didn't even think about it until afterwards. But, I mean, Favreau's the one that started the first movie, directing all of it.
Yeah.
It was really nice of them to give that kind of closure scene for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's just go ahead and admit that if they had chosen, I can't remember his name right now. Who directed Rush Hour? Ratner. If Brett Ratner had directed Iron Man, we might not be talking about this right now.
Yeah.
No, agreed.
And look, I don't have anything against Brett Ratner as a director. He's a horrible human, but as a director, he's competent, but he does not have the Favreau magic.
Well,
yeah.
But see, I remember when they announced Favreau for it, and I was like, wait, what?
See, those of us who had seen Zathura understood what was happening.
I had not seen Zathura.
As soon as they said Favreau, I was like, oh, shit, that's brilliant. Because if you still haven't seen Zathura, you should. Because it'll tell you exactly why they chose Favreau for Iron Man. I loved bringing Harley Keener back. The kid from Iron Man 3.
Yeah, no, I had to figure out who that was.
I like to imagine all of them standing around, though, being like, who the hell is this kid? Yeah.
But here's the thing. Do you think there's a possibility going forward he could take over as Iron Man?
Yeah, I don't think so. I feel like of everybody, and this is off the wall, but I feel like Shuri would make the best Iron Man.
Well, here's the thing.
I think they'll introduce Riri.
I had said Shuri before, but Shuri wouldn't be Iron Man. Shuri would be whatever Shuri wants to be. Like, there's no reason to make her step into a legacy role. And as far as the character's place within the MCU, I think T'Challa is your new Tony Stark, essentially, as far as being kind of the central guy. oh gosh, and I had it all figured out as to who the new Conscience is. I guess well, it's Sam. Sam would be
Spider-Man?
the new Conscience. Yeah. But I think it would be very interesting to have, it didn't work so well in the comics, but I think a teenage Iron Man palling around with Peter Parker, that could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's why I think they'll go with Riri. I think they will do some sort of movie about her. It's a good story. She's a good character, kind of where she comes from, and she, champions, while it has its faults, is a good team. So I could see him going there. Now, what I do want to see is they seem to be slowly setting the pieces in place for Young Avengers.
Yeah, right? Because they've got Cassie, Hawkeye has a daughter.
Yeah, they've announced Kate Bishop is going to be on Disney Plus on that Hawkeye show.
Oh, that's right. I totally forgot that.
Yeah, so there's two. All right. So looking like, I don't think they'll do like the Young Avengers per se, because Iron Lad is a little complicated and Patriot is. But I could see them doing a young team, kind of mixing like Young Avengers and maybe Champions together. So using Spider-Man that way, Kate Bishop, Stature. I would love to see like Vision come in, or Vision, or like part of that whole deal.
Well, maybe they'll introduce her in WandaVision somehow.
They could. That would be really cool. So I could see that there. They, I don't know what I was going to say after that. Yeah.
Well, let's, I think we've jumped around the movie and hit on most of the concepts there. The thing that really, oh wait, no, I'm sorry. I have to mention this. Did you guys notice that Hulk was eating his Hulka Burnin' Fudge ice cream?
I did.
No, I missed that.
Yeah, he was. He totally was.
What part was that?
When they're sitting at the dinner table and Rocket is talking to Scott, and he's like, "Oh, does Puppy want to go to space?" And yeah, Hulk's sitting there, and he's got a big giant tub of Hulka Burnin' Fudge. It was great.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so that was it. The Iron Infinity Gauntlet was badass, and they need to make a toy of that. Obviously,
yes.
They need to make a toy of everything. But in this movie, we got to see Thanos suffer the most complete and utter defeat, like, ever. And he was given, like, 3 whole minutes to recognize that it was over, that he failed. Like, they did this whole thing where the camera moved around him and he had to watch all of his assets turn to dust, and his face got all sad, and then he sat down. It was, I was just eating it up. Oh my gosh, it was amazing the way that they treated, like, one of the best film villains, or one of my favorite film villains I've ever seen. Like, he got his comeuppance in a way that was just incredible. Do you guys agree that was just amazingly well done?
Yeah, no, totally.
I think how they handled Thanos in general in this movie was really smart. Going from, like, the 23 Thanos,
right,
to the 2014 Thanos, and how different they are, and how they did use that, like, to show 2014 Thanos be like, well, I thought that was going to work, but you know what? Screw all y'all. We're going to kill everybody now.
Right.
And it was a really well played, how you could see how different the two were, which was done well.
And they were both fantastic twists, too. Like, to open the movie with them, in a way victorious, but there's also a theme there that, like, just because you kill the bad guy, and that was part of Thor's story as well. Like, typically the happy ending is I got my revenge and killed the bad guy. But that doesn't make for a happy ending. It doesn't undo what he did. And that I like that's a commentary on revenge movies, too, is that's not an answer, and that doesn't give you what you want.
Well, and they kept that Thanos from still being, I mean, yeah, he wiped out half the universe, but then they made it a point to have him say, it was too tempting not to take over the universe, so I destroyed all the stones. it keeps that Thanos on message. Like, he's not like a psycho bad guy. He's just a guy that really does believe.
Right. He was done.
Yeah.
And I also like that Thanos is the kind of douchebag that would quote himself at the end when he says, "I am inevitable," which is, what he saw in the recording before. But yeah, man, that scene was beautiful. Seeing him fall.
Yeah, and the battle was the craziest, nuttiest, awesomest battle of all time ever.
Valkyrie on a winged horse.
Yeah.
Howard the Duck.
Okay,
Wait,
so
put him in there.
I didn't know. Where was he?
I'm trying to think when it's towards. You see him when the Ravengers come in. He's kind of standing next to the Ravengers.
Oh my gosh, I hated to miss that. Yeah, that when I went by the comic shop after I saw it today, and she said I heard Howard the Duck was in it, and I was like, what? And I thought maybe she was mistaken, and somebody had told her something about Howard Stark. Yeah, Howard's in it. Yeah, I know. Howard Stark, big deal, whatever.
But screw you, Luke Cage. You don't get to come.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. But again, with the movie being overstuffed already, like, how do you do those characters justice?
Yeah.
All right, so I think we've covered everything fairly well. Are there any last little tidbits you guys have to bring up?
And this kind of goes more towards the future of things, but the ending, they very clearly have Thor with the Guardians. I just don't know how I feel about that. Like, I don't know. Maybe if it's just like, I hope when they do Guardians 3, Thor is not in it the whole time.
I was over the Star-Lord Thor thing about 30 seconds into it in the last movie. That doesn't do anything for me, and I'm with you. I hope they go drop him off somewhere or something. I am not interested in watching that dynamic for 2 hours.
Okay. I don't think I am less hostile to the idea than you guys are, but I will agree that I would prefer to see a Guardians movie that's not largely focused around Thor. I don't know. Maybe have him be like comic relief for the comic relief.
I'm not against the idea of Thor being part of the Guardians or even being. I wouldn't say a big part of the movie because it's an ensemble movie, so there is no real. Quill's kind of the center of it, but I'm not against him being part of the Guardians. I just don't need to see them jabbing at each other like that for 2 hours. It got old after a minute. The first time. I'm done with it. Let's not do that.
Yeah.
Fair.
Cool. Arian, any last thoughts?
No. I feel like we hit most of everything I wanted to talk about. It really did strike me how much that the Infinity Saga was really, in a lot of ways, the Tony Stark saga, and that's appropriate given that the MCU started in a very unsure and uncertain place, and they weren't quite sure what they had and what they were going to be able to do, and it was all contingent on the public buying into Robert Downey Jr., who, remember, like, now he's like the highest paid actor in the world, and yada yada yada. But like at the time, like,
he was risky.
He was not a sure thing at all. Like, it was.
If Disney had been in charge then,
they would have never hired him.
Right, correct.
Like, he would have never been Iron Man.
And now he got to go out on this amazing note.
Right, and like, yes, there was no end scene. But the first time I did stay till the end, and at the very end of it, when they put the Marvel logo up, you hear the clank from him working on the original armor suit in the cave in Afghanistan or wherever it was. And I thought that was a great inappropriate callback to to the first Iron Man movie and what started it all.
It's him not just forging the armor, but forging the MCU.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see. The only thing that's kind of a bummer about Cap and Tony being gone is that we won't get to see them interact with whatever is happening in the future. The X-Men, the Fantastic Four, Doctor Doom. Like, we don't get to see that interaction that we were all kind of looking for. But, we'll see it within the MCU at some point, maybe 10 years from now, but we'll see it. But it is kind of a bummer they won't be involved.
Yeah, but, it's... I appreciate and enjoy terminal storytelling. I like things that don't go on forever. I like a beginning, a middle, and an end. I don't enjoy TV series like... I was going to say like The Big Bang Theory, but then... So that totally sets me up for someone saying, oh, you mean bad TV series? I don't like TV shows that just go on forever. I much prefer the British model of television where it's, hey, here's 6 to 8 episodes per season, 2 or 3 seasons max for everything other than Doctor Who. We're going to tell you the story. We're going to be done. We're going to move you along your way.
Well, it just depends, again, on the skill of the writers and the freshness of the ideas. And typically people get kind of set into the format and the creativity goes away and they get really risk-averse. And I don't see the MCU... Yes, they work within their own tone, but if you look at it, they do take some pretty crazy risks within the tone and the style of storytelling that they've established.
Well, and see, I'm worried they're starting to lose it, though. And I hope they don't.
You're not wrong.
Eternals is one of the things they've announced, and Eternals are weird, man. Like, that's a weird comic.
As of this moment, I do not give a shit about the Eternals, aside from the fact that it's going to have the MCU label on it.
Yeah, and so, I hope they go back to taking more risk and go back to more like, let's make a weird car chase movie, or let's make a, this. Like,
you mean like The Last Jedi?
You see, though, we can get into that discussion.
What had happened was...
I think the biggest, the takeaway from all of it, and people have talked about this a lot, but it is still just dumbfounding what Marvel pulled off. Like, they essentially made an 11-year-old story over 22 movies. And when this started, that was unheard of. And, my mom knows who Rocket Raccoon is.
Right,
that is absolutely insane to me. And they pulled it off pretty much without any mistakes. There's a Thor Dark World here and there, but even still,
without
Thor
any
Dark
bombs.
World's not all. Yeah.
The problems are nitpicks and not like big glaring errors. Like, it's pretty well done, and it's pretty shocking how well done it is.
Right. And you were talking about Steve and Tony. I kind of wonder, I think it's going to have to be, who's going to be the one? People really love T'Challa, and I agree he's great. But outside of him and Spider-Man right now, I just don't know who are people going to latch onto as far as, a whole narrative down the line. Because that's Tony. This has been his thing, like you said, the whole way. And even movies he's not in, it's still kind of... he's there somewhere.
Well, nobody feels as
essential,
big, and superstar as Tony Stark and Steve Rogers in these movies.
Right.
And T'Challa absolutely, basically as soon as he showed up, did feel that big, but I don't know who his person to play off of can be.
Yeah. And maybe it's Captain Marvel. We haven't seen them interact a lot yet. So it could be. I mean, I think that's who they're... It seems like they're kind of leaning towards T'Challa being the Captain America, Strange being kind of the asshole Iron Man, and then
and then Carol doing whatever it is she's going to do. Yeah, and I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe, maybe we don't even get another Avengers movie. Maybe rather than Avengers movies, every once in a while there'll be something like Annihilation or, something like that. But they won't feel the need to worry about the team dynamic as much because it'll be more of a we've got this thing that we've got to face.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them doing like an Illuminati kind of thing. They probably won't call it the Illuminati. What was that last team that was Carol and T'Challa and Alpha Flight? When she kind of took over Alpha Flight.
If they make Alpha Flight that's anything other than a bunch of Canucks running around in red and white spandex, I'm going to be furious. But we'll save that.
Get Petey Williams up in there.
We'll save that for another day because we got to wrap this thing up. I feel like we really probably don't even need to rate this thing, but we'll go around and do it anyway. As a matter of fact, you know what? We're not going to give it a rating, but let's talk about rewatchability. In your own personal context of movies that you revisit and you go back to, Ryan, how do you feel this is going to rank as far as, over the years? Is this something you're going to watch every year? Will it be an occasional revisit? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I'm guessing it'll be an occasional. I don't think it'll be like Guardians and Winter Soldier that I probably watch too much, or like if they're on the background, I'll leave them on. But I can see watching it from time to time. Like I said, I really want to watch it together with Infinity War as one whole thing to kind of see what that looks like.
Yeah.
I plan on doing that when Disney Plus comes online this fall. But
with the luxury of a pause button.
Right.
Yeah. Is it easy to take pee breaks without missing anything? Always appreciated. So it's definitely going to be every once in a while for me. I don't think every year. I feel like it's probably, like I said, I enjoyed Infinity War better. It's definitely like in the top third or quarter of MCU movies for me. It's a pretty great movie that has the best battle scene of all time ever in it. So. And the time heist stuff is super fun, so it's a really good movie, and I enjoyed it. So there you go.
Yeah, I am absolutely thrilled with it. I can't believe they wrapped everything up and paid everything off as well as they did. I do wish I had had a little more distance between it and The Long Night, because the last episode of Game of Thrones...
yeah.
Like, I loved it, but I had just come off of the biggest superhero war in the history of cinema. So it was definitely, I won't say it was tainting my opinion, because I still dug the heck out of that episode, but it was in the back of my mind the whole time I was watching it.
Yeah. And you could see what was happening during the end of Endgame.
I didn't really have any problems with that, but I calibrate my TV settings from time to time. So, what are you going to do? And I want to watch it on the projector too, because I think that would help a lot as well. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Game of Thrones this week. We were here to talk about Avengers Endgame, an awesome conclusion to the so-called Infinity Saga. Ryan, what are you up to? And are you ever going to write anything for Needless Things again?
One day that'll happen. I actually just finished my second job, so I'm down to one job again.
Nice.
So I'll actually have a lot of time to kill. I realize I'm going to start being home every day at 3:30. I'm not sure what I'm going to do.
I say toy reviews.
Yeah, maybe I'll just start doing that again. Because I'm telling you, that Dr. Aphra's coming, and she's going to be wanting to review, I think. And
112 figures.
Yeah.
We need to start trading those off for you. You do one, I do one. Arian, what are you up to? Where can we find you online?
You know me, I don't do things. If you really want to follow me at Such a Lazy Man on Instagram, you can see pictures of my pets and occasionally my food. And some dumb memes that I share. So, and what more is there to life than that, really, when you get down to it? So,
That's really true. That and Avengers Endgame. That's about it.
there you go.
All right. Thanks a lot, you guys. While we were sitting there talking about Endgame last night, I just wanted to watch it again. I can't wait to see that movie again. And like Ryan and Arian both said, I want to sit down and take in Infinity War and Endgame in one viewing and see how cohesive they are as a single narrative. And granted, I guess technically as the end of a single narrative, but you know what I mean. Once again, the music that you heard at the beginning of the show was Suppose the Doomsday Cults Were Right from the KBK, which I thought was appropriate for Avengers Endgame. And you can go Google the KBK, get their album, get the vinyl compilation, all that good stuff. Check out Seed and Spark. I don't want to run through everything I put over in the intro again, because I know most of you probably aren't listening right now anyway. But please do check out needlessthingspodcast.com. We have tons of new stuff all the time. Beth and I both reviewed the most recent episode of Game of Thrones this past week, so you can go check out our different perspectives on that. Monday, I wrote a whole thing about whether or not I was going to order this insanely overpriced Snake Mountain from Super 7, which, I mean, look, I don't know that it's insanely overpriced. It's $600, which is a shit ton of money, and then $150 shipping on top of that. And you can't help but compare this kind of special toy project to the Katana, which, by the way, was last week's episode. We reviewed that. But, man, that's a lot of money and putting a lot of trust into Super 7 to deliver that product in the way that they're promising. But anyway, come back next week. I love you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Needless Things podcast. You're the best. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Downcast, or in the ears of a Trader Vic's employee. Love you. Mean it. Uh-huh.